Hello and welcome. What I'm about to share with you sounds impossible, yet it's happening right now in real time, and it could change everything we thought we knew about prophecy, politics, and the future of humanity itself. 5 sacred animals bred in Texas, transported to Israel, and hidden from public view are at the center of a theological firestorm that connects ancient scripture to modern geopolitics in the most explosive way imaginable. Religious leaders are calling it a divine sign. Governments are watching nervously, and millions around the world are asking the same question: are we witnessing the final countdown to events foretold over 3,000 years ago? I need you to stay with me through every minute of this, because by the end, you'll understand why something as simple as the color of a cow's hair could spark the next major crisis in the Middle East, and why what happens next might fulfill prophecies that scholars once believed could never come true in our lifetime. Let's go back to where this all begins, to a desert thousands of years ago, where God gave Moses a command so strange and specific that even today scholars debate its deeper meaning. In the book of Numbers, chapter 19, we find instructions for a ritual unlike any other in biblical law. God commands the Israelites to obtain a red heifer, not just any red animal, but one that is completely red, without a single spot or blemish, and one that has never worn a yoke or been used for labor. This rare creature was to be sacrificed, burned entirely, and its ashes mixed with spring water to create what Scripture calls the water of purification. This wasn't a symbolic gesture. In ancient Israel, anyone who came into contact with death became ritually impure and could not enter the temple or participate in worship until they were cleansed with this sacred water. Without the ashes of the red heifer, there could be no purification. Without purification, there could be no access to God's presence. The red heifer became the gateway between human impurity and divine holiness, between death and spiritual life. It was so central to temple worship that without it, the entire religious system would collapse. But here's what makes this so extraordinary. According to Jewish tradition, only 9 red heifers have ever existed that met these impossibly strict requirements. 9 perfect animals across all of human history. The last one was sacrificed before the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 AD. For nearly 2,000 years, there has been no red heifer, no purification, and no possibility of rebuilding the temple. The ritual became frozen in time, seemingly impossible to fulfill in the modern world. Until now. In 2022, something remarkable happened that sent shockwaves through religious communities worldwide. The Temple Institute in Jerusalem, an organization dedicated to preparing for the rebuilding of the Third Temple, announced that they had successfully located and imported several red heifers from Texas to Israel. These weren't just any cattle. They were carefully bred, meticulously inspected, and transported across the ocean for one singular purpose: to fulfill the ancient commandment and make purification possible once again. The requirements are staggering in their precision. The animal must be entirely red. Even 2 non-red hairs disqualify it completely. It must be female, at least 3 years old, and have never been used for any kind of work. It cannot have any physical blemishes, scars, or imperfections. And most critically, it must remain this way until the moment of sacrifice. The Temple Institute has been guarding these animals in undisclosed locations, monitoring them constantly to ensure they remain ritually pure. For the first time in 2 millennia, Israel possesses what many believe to be legitimate candidates for the 10th red heifer. And according to ancient prophecy, the 10th red heifer will be the one used when the Messiah comes. Let that sink in for a moment. We're not talking about a theoretical discussion or an academic debate. We're talking about physical preparation for events that Scripture describes as the climax of human history. The Temple Institute hasn't just recreated ceremonial objects as historical curiosities. They've fashioned the golden menorah, the priestly garments embroidered with exact specifications, the altar implements, and even the musical instruments described in ancient texts. Every piece is ready. Every ritual has been studied and prepared. The only missing element for nearly 2,000 years was the red heifer. That obstacle no longer exists. But here's where prophecy and politics collide with devastating potential. The location where the ancient temple stood, the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, is not empty ground waiting for construction. It's one of the most contested pieces of real estate on earth. On that exact site sits the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the third holiest site in Islam. For Muslims worldwide, these structures represent 14 centuries of Islamic presence and spiritual significance. The suggestion of removing or disturbing them to rebuild a Jewish temple is not just offensive, it's seen as an act of war. This is why the appearance of these red heifers has triggered alarm bells far beyond religious circles. Middle Eastern governments are watching, intelligence agencies are monitoring, because everyone understands that if serious attempts are made to use these animals for temple purification ceremonies, it could destabilize the entire region. The Temple Mount has been the flashpoint for violence before, and many believe it will be again. Some see the red heifers as a countdown timer ticking toward confrontation. Yet for millions of believers, both Jewish and Christian, this moment represents something far more profound than political tension. It represents the alignment of prophecy with reality in a way that previous generations could only imagine. In the books of Daniel, Ezekiel, Matthew, and Revelation, Scripture speaks repeatedly of a third temple that will stand in Jerusalem during the end times. In Jewish eschatology, this temple will be the site where the Messiah is revealed and where divine presence returns to dwell among humanity. In Christian prophetic interpretation, particularly among those who study biblical end times, this temple plays a central role in the events leading to the return of Christ, though the specifics vary depending on theological perspective. Some believe it will be a place of restored worship, others interpret it as a structure that will be defiled by the Antichrist during the Great Tribulation. Regardless of the interpretive differences, there's one point of agreement: the temple cannot function without the purification made possible by the red heifer. And for 2,000 years, that was the lock on the door. The impossibility that kept prophecy in the realm of the future, always approaching but never arriving. Now that lock has been removed. The door stands ready to open. Think about what this means in practical terms. The priests who would serve in this temple are already being identified and trained. The architectural plans have been drawn. The location is known. The sacred objects are prepared. And now the purification ritual can be performed. Every piece of the prophetic puzzle that seems scattered across history is coming together in our generation, not in some distant future, not in our grandchildren's time, now in the 21st century while we watch on our screens and phones. The symbolism embedded in the red heifer ritual itself carries profound meaning that reaches far beyond the mechanics of ancient purity laws. The paradox at its heart is striking. Purification comes through death, cleansing through ashes, life through sacrifice. The animal that never experienced labor or burden becomes the instrument of purification for those burdened by impurity. The blood that represents life becomes the means of cleansing from death. In biblical theology, this prefigures the ultimate act of redemption, that humanity's corruption requires a perfect sacrifice, and that restoration comes through what appears to be destruction. Many Christian interpreters see the red heifer as a foreshadowing of Christ's sacrifice, the unblemished offering that cleanses from sin and death, making access to God possible again. Jewish interpretation focuses on the literal fulfillment of divine command and the restoration of temple worship as prescribed in Torah. But both perspectives recognize that the red heifer represents a threshold, a crossing point between the profane and the holy, between separation and reunion with the divine presence. The question that echoes through history and lands in our present moment is this: are we approaching that threshold now? Have the preparations we're witnessing moved beyond symbolic gestures into actual prophetic fulfillment? Consider the timing. The State of Israel was re-established in 1948 after 2,000 years of exile, exactly as prophesied by Ezekiel and other prophets. Jerusalem came under Israeli control in 1967, opening access to the Temple Mount for the first time since the Roman destruction. The Jewish people returned to their ancient homeland after being scattered across every nation on earth. And now, in this generation, the final ritual requirement for temple worship has been restored with the arrival of these red heifers. The convergence is undeniable. Whether one interprets it through the lens of faith, coincidence, or historical cycles, the fact remains that ancient prophecies are intersecting with modern reality in measurable, documentable ways. The words written on scrolls millennia ago are being read alongside news headlines today. The prophecies that seemed safely distant have arrived at our doorstep. But this moment carries weight beyond religious enthusiasm or prophetic speculation. It forces fundamental questions about the nature of time, destiny, and human choice. If these prophecies are truly unfolding, what does that mean for free will, for peace in the Middle East, for the possibility of preventing conflict? If the script was written thousands of years ago, are we merely actors reading our lines, or do we still have agency in how these events unfold? These aren't abstract theological debates. They're questions with real-world consequences. Because the actions taken regarding these red heifers, the Temple Mount, and the pursuit of Third Temple construction will impact millions of lives across multiple continents. They could spark religious revival or regional war. They could unite faith communities or deepen divisions that already run blood deep through history. The red heifers are being kept in carefully guarded facilities, aging toward the minimum 3-year requirement for use in the ritual. Every month that passes brings them closer to eligibility. Every month increases the tension of what comes next. Will they remain unblemished? Will political circumstances allow the ritual to be performed? Will the attempt trigger the crisis that so many fear? Or will this moment, like others in history, pass without the dramatic fulfillment that prophecy watchers anticipate?
What makes this different from previous claims of prophetic fulfillment is the concrete, verifiable nature of what's happening. These aren't vague interpretations of world events or symbolic readings of newspaper headlines. These are physical animals raised for a specific purpose that meet ancient criteria that have been unfulfilled for 2,000 years. This is measurable. It's documentable. It's happening in plain sight, reported by mainstream news organizations, acknowledged by government officials, and prepared for by religious institutions with the resources and intent to carry it through. The world has reached a point where ancient commandment and modern capability have intersected. Whether this leads to the fulfillment of end times prophecy or becomes another chapter in the long history of prophetic expectation remains to be seen. But the significance of this moment cannot be dismissed. The Red Heifers represent a threshold between past and future, between dormant prophecy and active fulfillment, between the world as we've known it and whatever comes next. What we're witnessing is not speculation about distant possibilities. It's preparation for immediate action. The pieces are in place, the requirements are met, the intention is clear, and the consequences, whatever they may be, will reshape our understanding of prophecy, politics, and the future of the most contested city on earth. So as these red heifers continue to age toward the appointed time, as the Temple Institute continues its preparations, as Jerusalem remains the focal point of 3 world religions and countless prophecies, we're all left watching and waiting, not with passive curiosity, but with the recognition that what happens next might answer questions that humanity has been asking for thousands of years. The ancient words of Moses in the wilderness are no longer echoes from a distant past. They're instructions for a present reality. The prophecies that seemed safely abstract have become dangerously concrete, and 5 red cows hidden somewhere in the hills of Israel stand at the center of it all. Symbols of purity, instruments of prophecy, and perhaps the key to unlocking events that will define not just our generation, but the culmination of human history itself. This is where we stand, at the intersection of faith and politics, ancient text and modern crisis, divine promise and human decision. The red heifers have returned. The preparations are complete. The world is watching. And whatever comes next will test everything we believe about prophecy, destiny, and the future that was written long before any of us were born. Thank you for staying with me through this journey into one of the most extraordinary prophetic developments of our time. What we've explored together isn't just religious history or theological theory, it's unfolding reality that connects the deepest spiritual traditions to the most volatile political situations on earth. Whether you approach this through faith, skepticism, or simple curiosity, the facts remain. For the first time in 2,000 years, the ritual requirements for temple purification can be fulfilled. The implications of that reality will ripple through our world in ways we're only beginning to understand. Stay informed, stay thoughtful, and keep watching, because the story of these 5 red heifers is far from over, and its final chapters may be written in our lifetime.